You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. The Kansas City Star, the city's daily newspaper, apologized for years and years, decades of racist coverage against African Americans. How do black folks feel about that? Eric Wesson is the managing editor of the Kansas City Call, the black newspaper there, and Sheila Brooks is CEO of DC-based SRB Communications and a native of Kansas City. Glad to have both of you. Eric, first and foremost, of course, the Call has been known for its coverage of the black community there, a historic black newspaper there. What do you make of this massive spread by the Kansas City Star and them looking inward, apologizing for decades of racist coverage targeting African Americans? Okay, let me know about Eric. Sheila, you there?
I'm right here. Can you hear me?
All right, so guys, let me know we have the audio straight with Eric Wesson. Sheila, you take that question there. Your thoughts on this big spread in the paper and that apology?
Well, you know, Roland, African Americans have been disenfranchised because of those racist stories over the years. It's good to see leadership stand up, admit it, but we need to go the next step. We need to start hiring people who look like us, people who are in positions of power as editors as well as reporters, so that they can go out and cover these stories. And I guess my question to the Kansas City Star right now is, what's next? What do you do next? So all these years, you finally realized that this has been wrongdoing. How do you change that in your newsroom? What happens next?
Eric Wesson, managing editor of The Call, your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's kind of a little bit too much too late. Where's the reparations in all of this? You know, it's one thing to say, hey, we're sorry, we won't do it again, but it kind of looks like it's, you know, we apologize, coming by our paper again, black people, because we're okay now. And it's one of the things, as I was telling the publisher and president of the Star, it's like the horse is already out of the barn. Now you close the gate and you think everything is okay, but the horse is still out of the barn. So how do you make amends for an advantage that you've had in disenfranchising a race of people for 143 years? Where do you make amends at?
And that point you made there, Sheila, I think is a critical one while you're saying what's next. Because here's the paper examining its coverage. Now the question that, look, you're a longtime member of NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, so am I. And our deal all is, okay, now how do you look at inside? How do you now say this is the path we're going to chart forward when it comes to covering African Americans, when it comes to staffing, when it comes to things along those lines?
No, you're absolutely right. And what's happening is we see all of this in the backdrop of all of the racial unrest in this country. But we've missed so many of our stories in the African American community in Kansas City, Missouri. Those achievements that so many of those leaders had and aspirations and milestones. And now we're saying, okay, we're sorry, but how do you move forward? What are you going to do different in that newsroom? How do you go about getting the coverage right this time? And the way to start that is certainly to have African Americans who are editors, who are reporters, who are out covering stories, and who are part of the news gathering process. That's what makes changes in the newsroom. And it can't just be, oh, we're going to hire one or two people to make this happen. There has to be a complete overhaul of that newsroom.
I agree with that.
Eric, obviously, you're there with Eric, go ahead. Eric, go ahead.
And I agree with that. And this morning in our conversation, it was well, we hired a black editor now, so he's going to go out and we have this advisory board. And I'm thinking, why do you have to have an advisory board to tell you how to connect to the black community when you're here in the black community? I mean, I don't understand what that is. And I think a lot of reparations need to be made with that. But what was your question?
No, I mean, that in terms of picking up on that, because at the end of the day, that's really how, if you want to talk about this is what we did in the past, really the question is how you're charting a new future. And the reality is, let's just cut to the chase. White folks have no clue on how to appropriately cover black folks. And what they do is you also can't just say, yeah, we hired one. It's a hell of a lot of talented black journalists out there. And you got to have editors with guts to say we're not just going to hire one, we're going to actually hire more than that, and also make non-black staffers understand you've got to integrate African Americans into every single thing that you do, whether it's sports, entertainment, business, culture, lifestyle, food, you name it. That has to be the mission.
And it has to be, that's being intentional. And that's what has to happen. You have to be intentional about your news coverage. And that has not happened at the Kansas City Star, or for that matter, so many other media organizations in this country. And now, in the backdrop of the racial unrest in this country, everybody steps, whether it's newspapers or other media outlets, major corporations, major advertising agencies, global as well as national. And everybody's saying, oh, we're going to hire these DEI folks. That's not going to do it, folks. That's not going to change content and change coverage. The only way that's going to happen is that you hire people who look like you and me, Roland, who look like all of us here on this newscast, and then it trickles down. You have to hire them so they can hire other reporters and photographers and all of those other folks that we're talking about. But then, since we're talking about coverage, what's going to change as you go out in our communities, particularly in the community of Kansas City, Missouri? What's going to change in order to bring back the kind of positive coverage now, not the negative coverage, not what has happened over all these years in the past?
And, in addition to that, the hiring.
Eric?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In addition to the hiring practice.
Eric, go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
okay.
Go ahead.
In addition to the hiring practices, it also has to be an effort made to get that next generation of reporters. And one of the things that I suggested to them was, let's do some scholarships. When I was a member of the KCABJ, I can remember the Star buying us some coffee and donuts maybe once or twice for a meeting. But where's the outreach? Where's it going into Lincoln College Prep School, Central High School, motivating and inspiring the next generation of journalists to come in to write about it? We had a flood here several years ago, well, about a decade ago. It mentioned the damage that it did to the black community in passing. Every other story on there was about the damage that it did to the plaza. When we had the unrest here in Kansas City several months ago, when they stepped foot on the plaza, it changed the whole dynamic of things. But that's what they reported. And if it wasn't for the fact of George Floyd, I doubt very seriously today if the Star would have written an apology and done this series. To me, the series is okay, fine, and good, but it just seems superficial, Roland. It's like other newspapers have done that throughout the country, and I looked some of them up starting in June. They started doing it at the unrest of George Floyd. So again, my question is, if this is sincere, why did it take George Floyd for them to start talking about the practices that they've had for centuries? That's my problem. Where do we go from here? What do we do? This all seems good and it come by y'all moment, and they gonna go to bed and feel good saying, hey, we trying to do something better, but where's the fruits of your labor at?
And Roland, it is no longer a nice to have.
Sheila Brooks, final comment.
Yes, it's no longer a nice to have one African American that's an editor or a reporter. It's a moral obligation. No longer do we want to hear about talking the talk. We want to see them walk the walk. And you can do that. Partner with the National Association of Black Journalists. If you're looking for talented African Americans, we know how to find them if you don't.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Ain't that hard. Sheila Brooks, Eric Wesson, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you, Roland.
Joseph Williams, I want to start with you. What the Kansas City Star has done, it's important. This is what other newspapers should do as well. Go into the history. The New York Times did that when it came to the obits they did on African Americans. This is all a part of the reckoning, dealing with the history of race in this country and the role that media has played in fostering racism, white supremacy, bigotry in America.
Well, yeah, exactly. And part of the problem that I have with the series, I mean, yeah, absolutely, it is fine to get reckoning, put your cards on the table, talk about what you have done. However, it is superficial. There is no plan going forward. And you and I both know, proud NABJ member right here. I used to work for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. The Richmond Times-Dispatch. Now, if they don't have some reckoning to do, I don't know what paper does. And they have not yet even come close to doing anything like that. So I think that they not only do have to reckon with the past, which a lot of people are not going to be happy about. They don't want to hear these sort of things. They feel like the past needs to stay in the past, but you can't move forward unless you know what the history is. And I think that it's a good starting point. They need to partner up with NABJ. They need to run scholarship programs. They need to recruit from HBCUs. My own paper, the organization that I work for right now, U.S. News and World Report, we have had a problem with this. And that is one of the things that I brought to their feet, is we need to recruit internships. We need to recruit interns from Howard University right down the street. Not an intern has ever come from Howard J School. So there are things that it can do. It's low-hanging fruit. It's really, really easy. One other point that I do want to make is that the failure of the mainstream media back in those days and continuing in these days led to the rise of the black press. And you yourself, as a former executive editor of the Chicago Defender, one of the proudest newspapers in the history of the black press, it gave rise to those sorts of things that needs to be rebuilt. We need to have a black press on the scene because we know that the influence of white media is fairly limited, and they're only going to do the least that they can do.
That is certainly the case there. So you absolutely nailed it.
Back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video. It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.